Hey guys, Teresa here. Welcome back to my channel, Lost My Thread. Today I'm going to be sharing what I sewed in the months of April and May. I decided to join these 2 months together because I didn't have a ton of finished objects to show you from the month of April, but suddenly when I combine it with the month of May, it feels like a lot. So I usually do a chatty life update as part of this video, but I'm going to be sharing that separately next week. I'm going to start with what I'm wearing now, which is the Blanca Flightsuit by Closet Core Patterns. I'm sharing this first because I wanted to show you some things with it on me, and so that's why I'm wearing it. But frankly, it is just too warm of a day for that, especially in the room that I have a closed door, closed window. I'm getting incrementally hotter and hotter the more I'm talking about it. So let me just tell you all about this flight suit and why I love it. I've been wanting to make this pattern for such a long time, and I'm really glad that I finally have. This fabric is actually an Atelier Brunette bubble cord fabric, so it's a chunky whale corduroy fabric. I absolutely love the color. It feels really lovely. It is definitely quite warm though. The reality with this flight suit, especially if you make the long sleeve version, is it's just not very like layerable. You can't take layers off like you could with a shirt or a sweatshirt. You can put things over the top or underneath, I suppose, but it's definitely something that's more appropriate for colder weather. I actually had this originally in my autumn sewing plans, and I only just got around to finishing it now. I'm happy I've done it whenever I've done it, and I do really look forward to wearing this more in the autumn and winter months when I'm feeling generally a bit colder. It will keep me nice and cozy warm, but I have actually been enjoying wearing this in like a cooler evening, or you know, it's that kind of like middle, do you need a jacket, do you not? I feel like this is actually working quite well, but let me get into the details about this. I made quite a few adjustments on this pattern initially just based on the finished garment measurements. They give you quite a lot of those, and I made a test muslin initially, which was really not too bad, but I decided to make some small minor adjustments from that. I have written my adjustments down because there's no way I was going to be able to remember them, but the main thing to say is that there are 2 size ranges for this pattern, and my body measurements are slightly outside of the larger size band, just like slightly my high bust measurement's a little bit too small, but otherwise it fits quite well in my proportions, the smallest size, the 14 of the extended size range. So I decided to use that as my starting point because I felt like that would be a little bit closer. It has a bigger bust cup, so hopefully it would take less adjusting. And I do have to say, I feel like that on the whole worked quite well. I do have more room up here, but I'm not intending this to be a super tight fitted jumpsuit. I wanted to have a little bit more space. So the other adjustments I made was that I increased the rise, which is a very common thing for me because I have a high waist compared to most patterns. And I slightly lengthened the front of the bodice as well, just based on what I could see. I felt like it wasn't going to be quite as roomy to kind of blouse over the front. And then I also took the waist in quite significantly by 4 inches in total because I could see that it was going to be quite baggy at the waist. Once I made the muslin, I decided that I didn't need that extra inch in the front of the bodice, and the waist was actually just a little bit smaller than I wanted it, so I ended up adding an extra inch in, which is 3 inches less than the pattern intended still, and I added a little bit more ease into the hip as well. Obviously, it's going to depend a bit on the fabric that you're using, but I felt like this was going to make it the comfortable, loose fit that I was going for. Because I had extended the rise so much, I also extended then the opening to the pocket, so I had to change the shape a little bit just by 1 inch in the end. So I lengthened the curve of the pocket by 1 inch, and I feel like everything is sitting really nicely. This was one of those sewing projects that was a real joy to put together. Closet Core, I've talked about them before, I'm going to talk about them again. I really enjoy their instructions and their construction methods. I feel like they put things together in a very thoughtful way, but it's also really satisfying, and their instructions really do hold your hand. This is not a beginner project. I would not recommend it for a beginner, but I think if you're more intermediate, if you've maybe made some trousers or you've made a shirt before, I feel like it's something that's approachable, but I would definitely recommend making a test muslin first. But like I said, this is meant to be quite a relaxed fit. It has a collar, but there's no collar stand, so it's quite a simple collar construction. There is a zipper going down the front, and that's how you get in and out of it, which I always appreciate with a jumpsuit. I want to be able to get in and out easily. There is a waistband, which is the matching fabric, and obviously you could use a different belt, but I really do like it with the matching fabric. There's a cool thing with the pocket at the front where the belt loop is like integrated into the pocket, so it extends down really nicely. I think that looks really good, and there are belt loops going around the whole thing. There are these cool pin tucks on the back at the back of the bodice, which I don't feel like are probably showing very well in this fabric, but I still think it's a nice detail, and I liked putting them together. I feel like I said, everything came together really nicely. I feel like it is drafted really well as far as everything slotting together, but of course individual bodies are going to vary, and individual preference with ease and fit are going to vary as well. There are some darts to shape the bodice. I'm not sure if they were in the smaller bust cup option, but they are in the larger one. There are also some pockets that are meant to go on the chest and on the bum. This fabric is quite chunky. And there's something about this fabric, particularly when I was working with smaller pieces like a pocket, that the proportions were making it look almost like doll's clothes or like child's clothes. If you've seen or if you've worn or, you know, dressed your child in corduroy, there's something about it that looks really cute, but it does look different proportionately. And I decided to take the pockets off. I actually put the pockets on the chest and I had sewn them for the bum, and I was waiting to sort of place them in the right spot before I tacked them down. And in the end, I decided the whole thing would be better without the pockets. So just to show you, and you may or may not get the idea of what I'm talking about, but this is one of the pockets. It is super cute. Maybe it's just the size of the pocket and the proportion, but I feel like when I put it on, again, I kind of felt like I looked tiny or something, like it looked like a child or a doll, which wasn't really the look I was going for. I thought the whole thing would be a bit more sleek and elegant without the pockets, so I whipped the pockets off. I am happy with my choice. Like I said, this is a really nice thing to wear when it's just that little bit cooler, and I think I will be really appreciating it in the colder months, but I do recommend it as a project. I think it was really fun one to put together, and I'm so glad I finally made it. I would be really curious to make a version sized down, so that's something that they recommend. If you wanted more of like a slim fit, you could size down a size. I think that would be fun to play around with, and I'd be curious to see that in more like a cotton twill or possibly a denim. I think that would be really cool. I have now changed into something a little bit more seasonally appropriate, so sorry if there's a bit of a weird edit there. That was really the only like full project that I sewed in the month of April. The other things that I did, I replaced the zipper on these Jude jeans by Closet Core. I made these back in 2023, I think it was March of 2023, and I've actually had a few times I've had to repair little bits because I wear these so much. I love these jeans. I had to replace the jeans zipper this time round. Now I will say that when I made these, about a week after I made them, I noticed that one of the zipper teeth was missing, but it still worked. The jeans were still functioning. The zipper went up and down, and so I felt like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I basically just left it as it was, and it clearly worked for 2 years. So I think it was right to make that choice. However, in April, I was unzipping the jeans, or yeah, trying to take the jeans off at one point, and I noticed that the bottom part of the zipper had opened and it would not go back together. I could not possibly get that zipper down. And boy, am I glad that these were stretch twill fabric. I was able to like wriggle, get them over my hips. If they had been like a straight standard cotton twill or a denim that didn't have any stretch, I'm a little bit worried about what would have happened. I hope I would have had the foresight to actually cut through the zipper tape itself, but I'm not entirely sure I would have because I needed to pee. So I got them off, it was all fine, and I have replaced the zipper. It's a pain of a job. It's definitely not a very fun one to do. A lot of unpicking, like so much unpicking, because there are so many layers of stitching, and then you fold over and then you top stitch on 2 parts, and it is generally better when I've looked at tutorials of how to unpick a zipper to use a razor blade, which I did not have. I just had my normal seam ripper. It took forever, but I did it, and I have these jeans back in my wardrobe. I love them, and I'm glad. It was definitely worth the effort. I did also do something for around the house. We have some net curtains in the flat where I live, and we wanted to replace those, and one of the windows that we have is a bit of a strange length. It's not a standard length, so you cannot buy net curtains that just fit that window. So I had to hem the net curtains. It's not a big job, and it's not anything that's a big deal, but you know those kinds of projects where you feel like, ugh, I could be sewing something a lot more fun and interesting. So it was a pain to do it, but again, I'm glad I did it because now I have these beautiful net curtains that are nice and fresh, and I do see them every day, so it was worth it. The other thing that I sewed in April were a lot of muslins. So I made 3 muslins for my latest Clash of the Pattern series. I made 3 different pairs of trousers that I really did most of the details just to see what the fit would be like. Though they weren't like properly finished, it was fairly involved to make all 3 of them. And the finished trousers I finished in May. So moving into my May makes, this is the Mitchell trousers by Closet Core. Kinds of things that just aren't really going to show off on the hanger, but I'm showing you before I actually show you the actual photos. So this is a viscose twill fabric that I got from a destash. I love this color for trousers. I think it is so, so good. There's definitely a little bit of a chartreuse in the mustard. It's kind of halfway between the two. This is super soft fabric. It has wonderful movement and drape to it. It is really lovely against the skin. Really do love this fabric. And the Mitchell trousers overall are a really lovely pair of trousers. I did so much enjoy the process of making them up. They have the coolest pleat integrated into pocket situation. I really love the way that comes together, the way that it looks. There are optional waist tabs that I chose to include because I like that you can then adjust the waist so you can take it in a little bit. I will say this fabric, because it's a more slippery fabric, slinky kind of fabric, when I pull it tight, it kind of just loosens out a little bit. And these end up being a little bit looser generally in the waist than I had intended. And I think that's probably just because I didn't bother trying them on as a base fit, which they recommended. I felt like I'd made a muslin, they should be fine. But this fabric just has a little bit more give to it and a little bit more hang and weight to it. So I do think I will probably go back in and just take the waist in a tiny bit. So these ones do not have a waistband, but they do have a waist facing on the inside. So I'll have to take a little bit in on both of those, which I don't think will be a big deal to do. I think they'll be quite easy to do. This has a zipper fly. It's got a hidden button and hook and bar closure on the inside. It's really nicely finished. They give you the option of finishing with bias binding, which I did. I think it looks really beautiful on the inside. I opted for a single welt pocket for this. You can obviously choose not to use a welt pocket. I wanted to put one in there and I thought just one would be quite a cool look. I think because this fabric is a bit drapey, same with the other welt pockets that I made another pair of trousers, they're not really holding the structure in the same way, and I knew that going in, but I still think it adds to the look of them. I think they generally look pretty good. I do think in general I prefer a waistband for my trousers because I do wear them quite high just with my proportions. I think it sits a little bit better, but I really do love these trousers. I've been wearing them. They are really comfortable and I think they're a very cool pair of trousers. I did have to lengthen the rise by 1 inch on these, which is a very common adjustment for me, particularly with Closet Core. I know that doing that, generally things do fit pretty well. And as I said, I liked having the waist a little bit looser so that I could adjust it with the tabs, but I do feel like it probably could do with being a tiny bit snugger for me. And then these ones are the Taylor trousers. These are made in it's either a Lyocel Twill or a Tencel Twill. I think this one's a Tencel Twill. Has a little bit of drape to it still, so it is quite sort of moves quite well, but it has just a little bit more structure than the other trousers. And so I feel like the welt pockets on this one held up a little bit better than on the previous. I think either of these in a much more structured fabric would work better. So these are another pair of pleated trousers, part of my Clash of the Pattern series. I really enjoyed these ones as well. They were really satisfying to put together. This gives you the option of top stitching the pleats down a little bit at the front, which I did for 2 inches, which I feel like helps them to fall a little bit better. It doesn't add more bulk where I don't want it. I think these are a really great, just classic pair of tailored trousers. There's a lot going on these trousers when you actually put them together. I feel like they're very clever, very classic, and definitely something that I could see going back to again and again. These are really definitely going to be a workhorse in my work wardrobe for sure. I had to do a 1.5 inch full seat adjustment on this one, which looks really complicated when you see the visual for it, but honestly was pretty straightforward to do, and I'll put a link down below of how I did that adjustment. Other than that though, these fit really well. I didn't have to make any rise adjustments, so just be aware of that because like I said, I often do, so you may have to decrease the rise depending on how you want these to fit and your own proportions, but I was pretty happy with how it worked out. My favorite thing about these trousers, I feel like they should really be singing from the rooftops, and that is that it has a hidden elastic channel at the back waistband. It's not enough to make it gather, it's just enough to keep everything nice and flat against your lower back, but it also means that it's just a little bit more flexible when you want to sit down, when you're moving around. I love that there's just a little bit of give there. It's nothing dramatic, but I feel like it makes a difference. This one also has a zipper fly and a hidden hook and bar and button closure on the inside. This one was finished so beautifully. They get you to cut bias binding when you're cutting out your fabric, and I used the same binding as fabric to go around. I used both the pocket bags to match as well because I felt like it was a little bit more of a drapey fabric. I could get away with it, but I feel like it looks so beautiful on the inside, which is always a plus. I do think these ones generally are a real winner. These are the rose pants from Made by Ray. Now again, I can't remember which of these is a Tencel Twill and which is a Lyocel Twill. They're the same, it's just different branding. And I got both these and the green fabric from So Me Sunshine. I do like this fabric because it has a little bit of weight and drape to it. It has a slight sheen to it as well, which I think makes it look a little bit dressier, and it has a bit of a crispness to it. It holds the pleats really well. This is a slate color, so it's like a bluey gray, which is a color that I generally do really like wearing. These ones do not have a fly, it's just flat at the front up to the waistband. It has pleats on both sides, so 2 on each side, and some pretty nice roomy pockets. I did have to lengthen the rise on these ones 1 inch at the front and 1 3/4 of an inch at the back. This one has a elastic back flap front waistband, so it's intended to be gathered at the back. I think for being a gathered waistband at the back, it's not too bad. I don't think it's overly gathered. I'm pretty happy with that, but I will say that it's just a different look from the others. I feel like they're generally a nice, comfortable trouser for sure, and I would be interested to make them in a linen. I think they would be really great. But I will say, even though I have made that version, I have also made the shorts view. So there's a shorts view for these, and because I was cutting this fabric out, I saw I had quite a bit left over, and I could see that I had enough to just cut the shorts out at the same time, which meant that I could just batch them together, so I could work on each stage, do it on one pair of trousers and then on the other, and I felt like it made the whole process really quick and quite satisfying, and it was nice that by the end of it I had 2 garments, which was quite cool. I do think the shorts will be really cute, and I feel like because of the fabric there's a potential that I could get away with wearing them for work, because again they're just that little bit smarter, but I think they're going to be quite versatile and again very comfortable. If you do want to get really into the weeds with those 3 pairs of trousers, I will put a link to the supercut down below, which is basically the whole Clash of the Pattern series from beginning to end, and you will find out much more detail. And the one other garment that I sewed in May is a real bummer to me. Well and truly, it bugs me a lot. It is these shorts. These are the Friday Pattern Company sport shorts, and I was so excited to make these up. So this is linen that is left over from a shirt that I'm making, and I've kind of stalled on that, but I have made a little bit of progress in June. But it's a really gorgeous 100% linen fabric. It's very lightweight, very bouncy. I love the movement. I love this fabric oh so much. Again, it was one of those, I was cutting out the shirt and I realized I had more fabric left over and thought, I bet I could squeeze a pair of shorts out of it. With these shorts in mind, thinking that they would work well and they'd be comfortable for the summertime. So these have a bias binding that goes around the edge. Hopefully you can see that. The back is intentionally lower than the front. Not sure I really love that detail, but hey, it is what it is. I made it how it is meant to be. There are some slash pockets that also have the binding on there as well. And the thing with these shorts, guys, is that they're not my shorts. So, I mean, they are my shorts, but they're not my shorts. I ended up lengthening the rise on these quite significantly because they're meant to be very low rise, which I did not want. And with the other trousers, I measured my rise, compared that to the finished garment measurements, adjusted the patterns, and they were perfect. These ones, I did the same, and they are crazy high. Like I could pull them probably under, like tuck them into my bra. They are ridiculous. And I don't think that their measurements were accurate for the finished garment measurements. And so as a result, these are just too long in the rise. And I feel like they then either want to sit higher, which is a wild place to wear your trousers, or if they sit in my natural waist, they add a lot of extra bulk and they just sit a little bit funny. Now that I will say I could live with. As like lounge shorts, which was really the intention for these, I wouldn't really mind. But the problem really comes in how these are constructed. So when you are putting bias binding around the edge of fabric and stitching it in place, most patterns will get you to do that in 2 steps, which is how I know I should do it, but I wanted to just follow the instructions of the pattern and I did it in 1. So if you're doing it in 2 steps, you are unfolding your bias tape, and then one of those folds you are going to be stitching along. So you line up the edge of your bias tape with the edge of the fabric, you stitch on that first fold, you then fold the fabric around, and then you top stitch it in place from the other side. That is the way that you should be doing this kind of seam. However, They had in the instructions doing it what I think of as like the cheater way, the half-assed way, which I have been known to do from time to time, but was really not wise in this particular context. So the idea with that is that you take your bias tape, your double fold bias tape, you butt it up right to the edge of your fabric, and you stitch through all the layers at once. Now, the problem there is that as much as you can try to make sure that your fabric is really tucked into that bias tape, it might shift a little bit. And there are times where you think that you've got it in there and where your stitch is sitting, you don't quite catch it. But the other thing is with these particular shorts, because you basically make the front and the back, you layer them up and then you top stitch through both layers to create the side seam. Those seams are at tension when you sit down, when you squat, when you move around in these shorts. They are pulling, and you really want to be careful to make sure that your bias binding is really secured far into the fabric, or it might gradually start to pull. This fabric frays, and I think that is the main issue. I can show you guys on one side seam, I have some holes. Not what anybody wants. So I will tell you guys I actually have fixed this once. I took all these bits apart and I restitched, but I think the issue really is that the fabric, it is just pulling apart because it's fraying, so that little edge wasn't quite caught in there. I will say I'm seriously debating whether or not to unpick and restitch the seam. The other side seam seems okay, but I don't have a lot of confidence in these, and I feel like I'm in that kind of is it worth it stage. I think I'm going to try and repair this again because I love this fabric and I really love the idea of having these as comfortable lounge shorts. So I think I'm going to try one more time to unpick that and see if I can do more of like unfolding the bias tape and stitching along each of the sides. But when the shorts are already constructed, it is very difficult to do that. I'm going to do the best I can, which is all I can do. And I think it will be a bit of a 3 strikes you're out situation if these do tear in any way after this point. But other than that, yeah, I will say they're just not a great pair of shorts all around. They're not the best shape fit for me. I had the idea of taking some other fabrics that I have and doing some contrast binding around the edges and making lots of cute shorts for the summertime. This is not the pattern that I'm going to be using. I have since in June found the pattern that I really want to use for that style of short, and I'll be sharing that in my June makes video, so you're going to have to wait for that one. But these ones were definitely a bit of a fail for me. I will try to get them wearable at least, but I don't think these are going to be lasting for long in my wardrobe, unfortunately. It is funny to me how it's really only in hindsight that I realize how many things I was sewing for my bottom half in the months of April and May. That was never my intention. It's just sometimes the way things work out. I would love to hear if you have any favorites of the things that I made in the last couple of months. I think my personal favorite has probably got to be the Blanca Flightsuit by Closet Core Patterns. There's just so much about it that I really love. It's just such an interesting project to put together. It was really fun and satisfying the way things all slotted together. I love that fabric. The color is just so dreamy. It's definitely not something I'm going to be reaching for anytime soon, but I'm really excited to pull that out when the autumn and winter seasons come. I would love to hear also what you have been up to in your sewing room, if you've noticed any trends or themes of the things that you happen to have been making. I will be back again next week with the chatty catch-up section of this video. If you did enjoy today's video, please do make sure that you give me a like, subscribe if you want to see next week's video and other upcoming videos, and I'll see you guys very soon. Bye!